All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Steve Mahoney. I am a mentor with the Greater Hartford chapter of SCORE. Today, I am joined by Kathleen Thompson, my SCORE colleague, and she is going to be presenting a very important topic for all business owners about communication and why it is so important to have the right communication skills as a business owner. Before we jump into today's program, I did want to say a few words about SCORE. In case you're not that familiar with us, we are a nationwide organization made up of about 10,000 volunteers, and our job every day is to help small business owners. We provide mentoring services, we provide workshops and webinars like this one, and we have a website that has a host of resources for you, templates, articles, all sorts of information on a variety of topics. We have mentors across the country. We have 6 chapters, about 200 or so mentors in Connecticut. And if you're interested in learning more about SCORE and signing up for one-on-one mentoring, you can go to score.org, go to the Find a Mentor section, and then you have to fill out a little bit of information about yourself. There is a question in there that asks, what do you need help with? My advice to everybody is to be as specific as you can when you fill that out. That'll get you matched up with the right mentor. If you need help with marketing or finance or legal issues, we'll find the right mentor for you who has background in that area, because we have a whole host of mentors who've got a wide variety of experience in small companies, big companies, everything, every kind of discipline you can think of in terms of running a company. So if you're interested in doing that, you can check it out at score.org. Our mentoring services are free. It does require some work by you as the business owner to do the homework and to kind of do the work to advance your business. Our job is to help coach and mentor you along the way and provide you the guidance that you need. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kathleen. Kathleen, if you want to introduce yourself, and we can go from there.
Sure. I'm Kathleen Thompson. I learned communication the hard way at first. I've pretty much made every mistake that one can make with communication. And so as we go through this process today, know that I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks. I've tried songwriting, storytelling, speeches, PowerPoint presentations. Some of them have been good and some of them have been terrible. So I saw all along the way, I saw the power of great communication. And so I took classes and practiced at it to get better at it. So I'm here to encourage you today to let you know that everyone can, including you, even if you think it's not possible for you, or if you're good at it and you want to get great at it. There will be times during this presentation where you will see a blank screen. It'll just be black, and that's on purpose. Don't think the slides broke. It's because at that point in time, I want you to really listen to me and watch me with no distractions. So don't be worried. You ready? Here we go. Black slide. Picture this. You just started a new business, and this business was created out of the sweat and struggle you had trying to help your 6-year-old daughter, Mariah, learn how to read. She wasn't getting it at school, and you're frustrated, and she's coming home frustrated every day. So you helped her learn how to read by reading fairy tales to her, along with some other stuff. Because if there's one thing Mariah loves, it's fairy tales. And so now you've developed a new product to help other parents teach their children how to read using fairy tales too. Now, from your time in some online forums, you know that there are other frustrated parents just like you. Your market research shows there's other companies doing something similar, and you've developed high quality materials backed by research. You've tested it with people you know, and now you're getting ready to sell this product. And you call your company Cinderella Reads. You put up a website, and this is what your header looks like. Cinderella Reads, fairy tales for a fairy princess. You also make a YouTube video of you reading the story of Cinderella to your children. And the thumbnail on the video looks like this. And your story, when you're reading it, sounds like this. Once upon a time, there was a girl, her name was Cinderella. Your website stats show that people click away in 15 seconds, and this YouTube video only has 10 views. What are you doing wrong? So now you go, all right, I got to think about this, and I'm going to ramp up the interest, and oh, maybe I need the boy demographic. So I'm going to create a cartoon video of the story. And it looks like this. Now this has better production value, and I've got Cinderella Warrior Princess, which definitely boys might be interested in. And so now tons of people click on my video. But inside the video, it doesn't look like that. It looks like this. And the story is still the same inside, with me narrating, once upon a time, there was a girl named Cinderella. So people only watch the video for 25 seconds and no one clicks on the website link in the description. Meanwhile, you're watching all these other people's businesses taking off and you're like, I don't get it. I think I have the best product, or at least a niche product. Who does fairy tales for reading? But it's not selling and you don't get it. The difference is communication. Replace my fake Cinderella Reads business with your pizza restaurant, jewelry making, or car wash, and we all have the same problems. The best communicator wins, not the best product. Because people don't buy products, they buy solutions. And they buy from the one they think can help them solve their problem the best. However, they have defined what best is. So communication is how people know if you're right for them and they're right for you. Communication is what builds a relationship between people, and it builds trust. And communication is at the heart of your business. Now, when you're good at communication, it gets the attention, the right kind of attention. It gives you insight into each other. You get a clear yes or a clear no. You'll get raving fans who will talk about you to their friends. When you're not good at it, you don't get bad attention. You get no attention. You get ignored, like the owner of Cinderella Reads. So words are part of the picture. But what words? Put together how? And what else do we use to supplement our words? How important are visuals? What about your voice? What about your body language? They all matter. They're all part of what it means to be a great communicator. So today you're going to learn the principles of great communication you can use in a presentation, in a pitch to investors, when you're networking, and even in the elevator. What was wrong with what you did when you launched Cinderella Reads? A lot of stuff we're going to get into as we go through this course. But the one I want to focus on first is listening. While you did the product testing for Cinderella Reads, people shared their frustrations with the products out on the market. They told you they felt inadequate when their child couldn't get reading, even when you read to them all the time. But you didn't pay a ton of attention to that because it didn't help you make a better product. You didn't practice what I call dynamic listening, which is the first element of great communication. It's the prerequisite to being a great communicator. Now, some time ago, I attended a one-day workshop which featured 3 speakers who teach entrepreneurs online. The first one was Dave Ramsey. He talked about principles of entrepreneurship and the skills required to be successful. Next up, Seth Godin. He talked about how to see and how to be different, which is one of the things he talks about a lot. Now we go to lunch. And when we come back, it's Gary Vaynerchuk who is talking. He gets on the stage and says, you know, I listened to Dave and I listened to Seth, and they already talked about most of the important stuff. And we just got back from lunch. So rather than give the talk I was going to give, we'll do a Q&A. So go ahead and line up and we'll get some mics out. And the line started queuing immediately. Dynamic listening caused Gary to notice there was overlap in the comments, that the audience was a little bit restless and somewhat lethargic after lunch, and he changed his approach. And the audience was totally engaged with what he was doing. even though they were a little tired from lunch. So back to you at Cinderella Reads. What could you have learned from your testers when they told you they felt inadequate? How could you hear what was behind what they said and maybe even what they didn't say at all? What would dynamic listening look like in that situation? Well, it could look like asking questions, repeat back what you think you heard, sometimes even challenge them. Really dig in so you can better understand what it is they're saying and get to the bottom of it, as long as it's done with respect. Dynamic listening also would look like paying attention to their body language, to what they don't say, to the energy between you and them, the energy in the room, the noise level in the room. Whether it's one-on-one or small group conversation, or whether you're presenting something to a large audience. And that's what Gary Vee did so well. Because the best speakers are great listeners. They adjust what they're going to say based on what they hear, whether it was the Q&A at the last speech they gave, emails from customers or followers, and even reading body language in the moment. One day I was surfing the internet and I just happened to stumble on this TED Talk, which was called The Happy Secret to Better Work by Sean Achor. Here he was on the TED carpet telling a story about how he and his little sister Amy were playing on their bunk beds when they were kids, and somehow she falls off. I've got a link to this talk in the handout where you get to listen to hear how it totally wasn't his fault that she fell off. And he convinces her not to cry because she's not a human, she's a unicorn. Now, after his short story, he says that what he discovered at age 7 is what he's been studying ever since: positive psychology. Sean then spends the next 9 minutes explaining what positive psychology is and how it can help us at work. His talk happens to be one of the most popular TED Talks ever, at over 25 million views. Why? Not because he has the best stats or visuals. Some of them are pretty cool, but some of them aren't so great. His talk is great because Sean knows how to speak well. He uses techniques that you can learn, and I call it the SPEAK method. The SPEAK method is an acronym. S stands for story. You've probably heard that people respond to stories more than any other form of communication, and that's clearly true based on 25 million views on Sean Achor's talk. Story is so important that we're going to spend more time on this today to help you tell a better story. And you'll find out that not everything you think is a story actually is one. P is for preparation. Preparation is key to outstanding communication. Preparation includes other P's: planning and practicing. You prepare what you're going to say, and you prepare how you're going to say it. And you need to practice more than you probably think you do. And it even matters when you're in the elevator. E stands for emotion. We're going to talk about this in a little more detail later too. If what you're saying doesn't make people feel something other than boredom, they won't stick around. Even if they have to be there, they'll check out mentally, because they can always multitask by hiding their phone underneath the table. Or they can click on something else while they're looking like they're paying attention to you. And not only do you want people to feel something, but as a business owner, you want them to do something, take action, make a life change, buy into your vision, subscribe to your newsletter, buy your product. But people have choices now more than ever, and they can easily not choose you. You want to communicate a vision that people want to participate in, and keep that goal in the forefront of your mind as you craft your communication. You can't totally control the outcomes, but you can improve the likelihood of a positive outcome. The right audience at the right time with the right message communicated the right way, and people will be running to take action like they've just been waiting for you to show up. K is keep it simple. The hallmark of a great communicator is to explain complex concepts in a way that sounds simple, not dumbed down, but explained in simple terms. Those aren't the same thing. Sometimes it's with shorter or simpler words. Sometimes it's with a graph or a chart or images. It's up to you. You decide depending on what it is you're talking about. But know this, simple and clear wins over complex and cute every time. All right. Now that you've got the speak framework for great speaking, it's time to learn how to tell a better story. Telling a great story is key to capturing the mind and the heart of your audience. People do this all the time, sometimes without thinking about it. Good parents, effective leaders, dynamic speakers, great writers, they all tell stories. And why do they do that? Because it bypasses the part of the brain that's constantly evaluating the situation to determine if we're safe or not. The story captures our imagination, which is on the other side of the brain, the right side of the brain, the part that can incorporate new information and expand our worldview, the part that isn't simply trying to be safe. Great stories can mean something on multiple levels too, which is really cool. And they can often address an underlying problem or a question or a worldview without directly talking about it. But it can't just be any old story told any old way. We've all heard the guy who tells a story that is so boring and goes on forever. We are bored and we try to find a way to sneak away. So how can we not be that guy? How can we tell a better story? Even a great story? That's up next. What is a story? Anything I tell? No. A story is something that captures our imagination. It makes us care, and it sparks insight that leads to change. Now, there are other narrative structures that people might call a story and isn't. One would be an anecdote. This would be something like a short quip or a quote or information to support what you're saying. It can be very effective, and it's not a story. A second narrative structure would be a narration. This is similar to a story, but it's more of a retelling of events. Sometimes the person who's telling these events gets lost in the story themselves, gets lost in telling it themselves, and they almost forget that you're there. There's also pieces missing to this narration, an arc or tension, new insights or action, or sometimes the purpose. Sometimes you wonder if the purpose is just for them to hear themselves talk, or maybe it's because they're reminding you of an experience you shared together. So we're going to do a little experiment together, an exercise where you're going to guess what type is this. And you can either think it in your mind or you can type it in the chat. And I won't see what you're typing, but Steve will. The first one. Did you know that 25% of first graders struggle to learn to read? My daughter Mariah was one of them, and I ended up having to help her learn myself. Ask yourself, is that a story, an anecdote, or a narration? Number two, there was my daughter Mariah, standing on the steps of the school bus, grinning from ear to ear while I took her picture to celebrate her first day of first grade. She couldn't wait to go to big girl school like her sister Olivia. 4 months later, we had to fight with her to get on that bus. We knew something was wrong. Our bright-eyed child had become sullen and withdrawn. We talked to her and the teacher. The teacher says, "Oh, she's just a little delayed in reading. It's nothing to worry about." But it is. Mariah acts out at home. She never wants me to read a bedtime story anymore, and the teacher can't seem to help her. One day, Mariah flat out refuses to get on the bus. We're at our wits' end. What's a good parent to do? Try and figure it out ourselves, I guess. So we try the one thing Mariah will still listen to: fairy tales, stories of daring and love and happily ever after. We read to her and then tried some things to help her read, making it all part of the fun, recapture her delight at hearing stories. And it doesn't work at first, but at least she's listening. Slowly but surely, we try all these different things and we finally hit on the right combination of fun and challenge and teaching, and Mariah is off and reading and skips onto the bus once again with the sparkle back in her eye. Is that a story, an anecdote, or a narration? All right, number 3. There was my daughter, Mariah, standing on the steps of the school bus, grinning from ear to ear while I took her picture to celebrate her first day of first grade. She couldn't wait to go to big girl school like her sister, Olivia. 4 months later, we had to fight with her to get on the bus. We knew something was wrong. Our bright-eyed child had become sullen and withdrawn. We talked to her and the teacher. She's just a little delayed in reading. It's nothing to worry about. So we grit our teeth and we keep reading with Mariah at bedtime. Over time, her love for stories overcomes her frustration, and she's eventually off and reading and skips onto the bus once again. Is that a story, an anecdote, or a narration? All right, the first one was an anecdote. It was just a couple of tidbits of information. You might have felt a little something when I said that 25% of first graders struggle to learn to read, which is true, by the way. But really nothing much happened there. The second one was a story. It made you feel something. There was a progression. The characters changed, both the parents and Mariah. The third one is a narration. And why isn't it a story? It sounds like a story. It even started the same as the story. But what makes it not a story? It had vivid description, and it probably captured your imagination, except but now it was the second time, so maybe not quite as much. But it didn't result in real change for the characters. Mariah just kind of grew into her ability to read. The parents just kept doing what they had been doing all along, and eventually it worked. So it didn't have the right structure. Now, you can effectively use all 3 of those narrative types, along with poetry and all kinds of other things. Each one has its place. It's important for you to understand which it is you're actually using and using it on purpose and having a reason for it. So for now, we're going to focus on story because it's the most powerful. Story has 5 parts, shown by this diagram. The first is the introduction. This is where you describe normal life with no hint of what's to come. And I'm going to use the original Star Wars movie as an example. Luke is on the planet, I forget the name of it, doing chores, bored out of his mind. Next, inciting incident. This is where tension comes into the story, where it is impossible for the character to stay the same. Luke finds a message from Leia that was intended for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Luke's life will never be the same again. Section 3, part 3, the climax. Lots of hard stuff happens, and we get to the climax where the question is, will they or won't they succeed? And who helps them along the way when it gets hard? Yoda helps Luke get through the hard times. Part 4, change. How is the hero different because of the journey they took? Luke has an adventurous life as a Jedi Knight, nothing like his life on the planet at the beginning of the movie. And then we get to the resolution where all the tension is gone. Everything is well. The problem is solved. The Empire has been saved, at least for now, because there have to be 42 sequels to the movie. So now we're going to take my story from before and break it down into parts. And you'll notice that I highlighted the beginnings of the paragraphs, so you don't have to read the whole story. You can just see paragraph 1, introduction, paragraphs 2 and 3, the inciting incident, paragraph 4, the climax. What's a good parent to do? We don't know. Are we going to make it? And then the end happens to be both the change and the resolution at the same time. So, because remember, this story wants to capture the imagination. It wants to make the listener care and cause change. Good structure does that. It takes the reader or the listener on this emotional journey to a purposeful end. Not just any old end, but one on purpose, one that gets the point that you want to make across. Now, you might already be thinking how you can incorporate this structure into your stories. And at the end of the handout you got yesterday are some practice exercises, and there's one in there so you can practice this for yourself. All right, so now you know the 5 parts of a well-crafted story. Now we're going to talk about 3 elements that are critical to a great story. The first is detail, the right detail, because the purpose of the detail is to excite the imagination and to help someone feel like they're part of the story. So you only want to include the detail that's actually germane to the point of the story, that helps push that point along. And an example from my Cinderella Reads story is where I say, we knew something was wrong. Our bright-eyed child had become sullen and withdrawn. Now, what if I left off the second sentence and just said, we knew something was wrong? It's not powerful enough. I can't picture myself in the story, and so I don't care. Okay, so you knew something was wrong. Big deal, ho-hum. What if I added another sentence after the sentence I ended with and said, our bright-eyed child had become sullen and withdrawn. She didn't eat and didn't play with the other neighborhood kids. Well, that's actually too much information. It actually detracts from the drama rather than adding to it. And remember, as a business owner, your stories have an extra purpose, not just to entertain, not just to make us feel something, but to encourage us to do something. And so right now, the way this story stands about Mariah and me as the parent, or you as the parent, it makes us feel something, doesn't it? But it doesn't necessarily make us want to do anything. And that's where element 2 comes in, high stakes. All will be either wonderful or lost. What are the stakes in the story I read? We're not totally sure. Maybe we kind of realize that if Mariah doesn't learn how to read at this young age, it's going to be a problem later on, but we haven't spelled it out. So we're going to want to work on that in the future. And you're going to want to work on that too. What are the stakes in your stories? A third element is stickiness. The listener felt something so strong that they'll remember it for a long time. Even if they don't remember most of the story, there's some core of the story that they will remember, which is hopefully the main point. There's this kid's book called Pierre by Maurice Sendak. And when I was preparing this talk and I was thinking about this section, I thought of this book. In the book, the kid, who's named Pierre, says, I don't care to everything that anyone says. Now, I didn't remember the name of the book. I also didn't remember the author. All I did was Google "I Don't Care" book, and it pulled up on Amazon and also showed me a video of somebody reading it. It was so memorable that it stuck in my mind from childhood until now, because it was repetition. The kid said, "I don't care," and the illustrator had him looking like this with a face on over and over and over and over. So that's one way to make things sticky. Repeat them, especially if it's short and easy to remember. Another way to make something sticky is to choose words that evoke emotion, that paint a really vivid picture, or have stronger sounds so that they sound like they are. Some examples: not sticky, nice, sticky, delightful, charming, not sticky, hurt, sticky, broken, cut, wounded, suffering, not sticky, sad, sticky, sobbing, dejected, bitter, more vivid, more clear, sound like they are. All right. Now there's an elephant in the room that oftentimes people do not talk about properly, and that's humor. When humor is done well, it can make what you say way more sticky. And you can make points that you might not get away with when you're being serious. But humor has to be done well. Do not tell jokes if you're not great at telling jokes. Maybe tell a story that could be construed as humorous, but at least if it's not funny, at least it's a good story. Because if you try to use humor and it doesn't work, you bomb instantly. And I've got 2 videos in your handouts that talk about using humor well if you want to get better at that. Now, the best way to get good at all this storytelling is to practice. Practice writing, practice analyzing your stories, and practice telling them. And as you can imagine, there's a homework exercise in the handouts. Now that we've covered the S in speak, we're going to skip to K, keep it simple, because you've learned how to craft a great story. And now we want to talk about which stories to tell and how to help the listener remember what you said. Stickiness is part of keeping it simple. If people can't keep track of the characters, it's too complicated. If there's too many buzzwords, it's too complicated. If there's more than 3 points, it's too complicated. If your story or presentation is too complicated, people can't follow you, and they'll never ask you to clarify. They'll just nod their head politely while they're creating their grocery list in their head. When you make it simple enough to hold their interest, you earn another chance to explain more later. As we said, all stories have a purpose to move someone to change, to go from here to here. And business owners have an extra challenge to move the customer to do something. And to do that, it's important to make the story about the customer, even as you might be telling a story about yourself. Donald Miller, who's the founder of StoryBrand, says that the customer believes they're the hero of their own story, and they would be right. If you position yourself as the hero, they perceive you as competition. If you position yourself as the guide, like Yoda, you can help them. So let's go back to my story again with the keep it simple principles and the audience in mind. And let's look at who the audience is for the story that I told the original way. Again, I've highlighted certain lines so you can kind of glance at those while I'm talking. The audience for this story is other parents in the same situation. Parents who have unfortunately feel that they have to supplement the school's reading education with their own, and they have no idea how to do it. They've heard this story and they now see that it's possible, and now they're ready to take action. So let's say that it's a slightly different audience you're trying to reach this time. That this audience is parents who don't want to teach their children themselves. They want to go to the school board and crusade for changes in education, whether it's about reading or some other topic. So now you don't sell reading programs in this business. You teach parents how to lobby and make a successful case in their own school district for changing the reading curriculum or some other curriculum, and also getting additional help into the school district. Same story, different purpose. So now we want to keep it simple and only include the details that matter for this audience. So we're going to change this story. The first part's the same, so I kind of grayed it out. We get to the bottom, this is where it changes, and I highlighted the parts that demonstrate the changes. Because in this case, when I tell this story to these parents, they learn that they can make a difference when they go to the school board with a good story, with facts, and a prepared presentation. And you better believe that they're going to do that. They're going to go to the school board with a compelling story about Mariah or their insert own child's name here to make their case. So choosing which story to tell and how to tell it is about them and not you, even as you're talking about yourself. And even better is if the story is about a bigger purpose than either one of you. The purpose becomes, what larger, grander story do I want to invite my audience into? What story and details will help someone see themselves and move them to change, to want to be part of this great story? So now you have what I call a bigger story filter. Is my story compelling enough? Does it have a larger purpose? Now, as my story stood when I told it, it's about me and my daughter Mariah, or you and your daughter Mariah. And other parents can probably see themselves in the story, and they want to help their child too. But as I said earlier, what are the stakes? It's another way of asking if the story's big enough. Now, we can make this story bigger by talking about who and what Mariah can become now because she can read, and contrast that against the potential that would have been lost to the world if she didn't learn how to read. So now that we have this bigger story filter, what details do we leave in or take out or add? And you saw that demonstrated in the story, shown two different ways. You only want to include the details that encourage the listener to long to be part of this larger, more purposeful story, to picture this themselves participating in it, to doing these things even when it's hard. So when you're in doubt, leave it out. You've probably heard that expression before if you've taken any kind of a writing class. But I got to tell you, and you probably already know this for yourself, it's way easier to say it than it is to do it, because it's a lot easier to make things complex than it is to make them simple. I know because I've changed this presentation at least 4 times trying to simplify it for you. When people can't picture something right away, they tune out. And you have anywhere from 15 seconds on, say, your website to 60 seconds if you're in person giving a talk to capture their imagination. Otherwise, it just sounds like blah, blah, blah. So what I've done is I've edited the first part of our story to make it more complex because, you know, I've been intensely studying this subject for 3 years now. There was my daughter, Mariah, standing on the steps of the school bus, grinning from ear to ear while I took her picture to celebrate her first day of first grade. She was one of the 4 million children in the CSY operating in the self-same undertaking and was enthusiastically anticipating the adventure that awaited her. You're probably rolling your eyes right now because I'm rolling my eyes and I just said it. This made-up story shows how we can add complexity because we know too much. It's the first of 3 common problems that make communication complex. It's called the curse of knowledge. So what did I do wrong in this little highlighted section of my story? A lot. I used unnecessary statistics, which make no one feel anything ever. I also used an acronym, CSY. No one knows what it means. I made it up, current school year, in case you're curious. And I used words and passive voice, which no emotional impact, and oh, by the way, can sound pompous and arrogant. So I clearly don't want to do that. But it's hard to go back to the beginning and talk to beginners. And that's the challenge we all have before us, because that's what we must do. We have to strip everything else away, the stats, the data, and tell the story in a way that they'll get it. And not feel as though we have to tell them everything we know, because they can only handle so much at once. We want to earn the right to teach them more. A second problem creating complexity is what I call fuzzy creativity. This is when we try to be so memorable and we go for cute or creative, because we know what we mean, but it turns out that in our attempt to be creative, they have no clue. Now, we see this a lot on taglines and video titles. Even some famous brands fall prey to this from time to time. And I did it with my Cinderella Reads example at the beginning. Cinderella Reads, fairy tales for a fairy princess. It's cute and catchy. It even has 2 Fs, which makes it memorable. But you have no clue that this is a website that helps you teach your child to read. So simple beats cute and creative every time. Even catchy subject lines or YouTube video titles have to be simple, easy to understand. People know instinctively what it is you're talking about. Now, if you can be simple and creative, super. That is where the gold lies. But if you can't seem to do both, go with simple. Here's an example. I attended a webinar with Pat Flynn, who teaches online entrepreneurs, and he was trying to come up with a subject for his video. And he had 4 choices, which you can see on the screen. And when you look at them, all 4 of them are actually simple. They're all really clear what his video was going to be about. You'll notice that C was the most creative. That's the one he chose, and it got a ton of clicks. Now, when you get good at stuff like this, at creating simple plus creative, you can use these little taglines to introduce yourself to someone and say they ask what you do. Like, for example, if I'm Pat Flynn, I could say, Tim Ferriss changed my life with literally 1 question. And now I help entrepreneurs ask the one right question that gets their business off the ground. Do you think when I say that somebody's curiosity is going to be aroused and they're going to want to know what the one right question is, and that's going to lead to a conversation? You better believe it. All right. Now, the third problem creating complexity is the use of visuals. As I talk about how best to treat visuals, you are going to see on the screen the opposite of good. You are going to see what not to do with visuals while I explain what you should be doing. Visuals should complement you. They should not compete with you. The focus should be on you, the speaker, much of the time. Visuals should complement what you're saying. They should not repeat what you're saying. Visuals should also be large and obvious and able to be interpreted at a glance. And as you can see, none of those met the criteria. The next one I'm going to show you is a sample of a good visual, and this is a screenshot I took from one of the talks in the handouts. This is Seth Godin. He's speaking live. His visual is actually behind him, but the camera used this angle when it was recording it so that the YouTube audience could see both at the same time. He kept it simple. He stripped anything non-essential away. He was ruthless in cutting till he got to the bare bones. If you do this, your audience and your business will be glad you did. So I'm sure you're thinking to yourself, all right, Kathleen, but what if I need to show data? What if I need to show numbers? The next few slides are going to show you some ways that you can show data so that it means something to your audience and your listener isn't ignoring you while they read what's on the slide. Option 1, show only the highlights of what you're going to say and put the detail in the notes section below the slide. And if somebody wants a copy of the slides, you make a PDF of the notes pages, which is what I did for you, so that they can see both the slide and all the information that backs it up. Option 2, point the eye where you want the listener to look so they can do it quickly and then turn back to you. In this case, I only want to talk about the UK and the US, so I've highlighted those. Option 3, complex information, and I want to point the eye in a specific place. So I use arrows and circles to direct attention to one place so someone isn't trying to read the entire page. And option 4 is when you have extremely complex data that you normally would display all on one slide, all at one time, but in this case, you're going to direct the eye toward what you're talking about at the time you're talking about it, even when the data is complex. And you're going to hide the text in the notes below the slide unless it's a headline. So now you're all presentation gurus and know what you're going to do with your visuals. And now we get into E of speak, which is emotion. You know how to tell a story. You're keeping it simple. And that's great. Telling the right story, choosing only those details that serve the story's purpose, crafting the story well, and using the right visuals help the listener feel something. And then there's more. That's the emotion, how you say it, your voice and your body language. Believe it or not, those represent 97% of communications effectiveness. The part we just covered is only 7%. So we're going to have Voice Techniques 101, Lesson 1, breathing. Now there's all kinds of complicated breathing techniques. You can read whole books about breathing, and I've got one in the handouts, but I'm going to make it super simple. Breathe in through your nose, not your mouth. 95% of people breathe in through their mouths. When you breathe in through your nose, it keeps your voice moist and it keeps it warmer, and it helps you not lose it. Number 2, only talk while you're breathing out. Don't hold your breath while you're talking and then let it all out at once. Number 3, breathe during the commas and the periods of your sentences. This helps you keep your energy up and it helps with pacing. So since everyone's on mute, if you're in a safe place where no one else can hear you, because I don't want you to feel embarrassed, we're going to try this together. I'm going to explain what we're going to do first, and then we'll go back and do it together. So you're going to breathe in through your nose, all the way below your ribs. I know you can't see below my ribs, but I'm holding my hands underneath my rib cage, and I'm going to see and feel those ribs expand. Then while I'm exhaling, I'm going to say, Kathleen wants me to talk while my stomach is coming in. And what I should feel, and what you should feel when you try this, is a smooth air going, making your stomach go down, not held and not Tension, that's tension. You don't need it. It doesn't help you. All right, we're going to try this together. Inhale. Kathleen wants me to talk while my stomach is coming in. Got it? You're perfect. You got breathing down. All right. Lesson 2, tone. A lot of us have a tone that we use all the time without thinking about it. We've picked it up along the way from other people that we heard. And here is a chart with the most common choices. You'll notice there are columns in the chart off to the right, which talk about air, edge, and mouth. And each one of these tone types has a varying amount of air, edge, and mouth. Air is how much air comes out of your mouth. Edge is piercing sound like this. And mouth is whether your mouth is wide open, not open much, and whether it's wide or whether it's open tall. So now I'm going to demonstrate each one of these tone types.
My name's Bugs Bunny. How are you? I don't need much air for this, but I have lots of edge because you can understand every word I say because it's piercing through and I hardly have to open my mouth.
My name's Kim Kardashian. I don't need much air and I don't open my mouth much either. And I have a certain amount of edge, but not a whole lot. Hi, I'm Marilyn Monroe. I have so much air coming out of my mouth that I have to breathe every other word. And not only that, but there's no edge. And so it's kind of hard for you to understand what I'm saying. And I don't need to open my mouth much because who cares? My name is Adina Menzel and I sing on Broadway. And I have lots of air and lots of edge so you can understand everything I sing. And I open my mouth wide open to the side. Hello, darling. It's your aristocratic grandma here. I have a fair amount of air, but I have no edge because I open my mouth this way. And so if I didn't enunciate with my tongue, you probably wouldn't understand one thing I was saying. What you want is some kind of blend that's going to be unique to you that you're going to create after practicing. You want a little bit of edge so that people can hear and understand what you say. And then you want a certain amount of air and you want to open your mouth a little bit more than you probably do now. And then you can use these other tone types for color. If you want to tell a story, you can use them. Like if you want, or if you want to be meditative, you could be breathy. People who do meditation videos often speak with a breathy tone because it sounds empathetic. You can be brassy to get attention. You can be gravel if you want to sound a little bit casual. And nasal if you have to talk over a noisy room or want to sound like a little kid. But if you use one of those tone types all the time, it's really boring or annoying, and sometimes it's both boring and annoying. As you would imagine, there's a handout, there's a practice in the handout for you to practice this, and it'll be fun. At least I think it'll be fun. All right, so now that you've got the 5 tone types, there's 3 key building blocks to having a great voice. The first is pace. Now, pace is somewhat personal. Some people like to talk faster than others, and it's also regional. Sometimes people might tell you that you're talking too fast, and it might not be completely true. It turns out that you can talk faster than you think, as long as you pause to give people time to process what you say. And that will happen as long as you take the breath lessons seriously and breathe at the commas and periods. You can also vary your pace by choosing to stress important words, slow them down, speed them up, put emphasis on them in certain ways. Here's an example. I thought I knew what I was doing, but boy, was I wrong. Other than the pause at the comma, every other word was the same length. So now if I think about the intent behind what I want to say and let that guide me, I'm going to stress certain words. I thought I knew what I was doing, but boy, was I wrong. Thought, boy, wrong. Now let's talk about filler words. Filler words are often used to control the pace instead of pausing. Words like you know, like, or so. And is another one, I forgot to mention it in my handout. If you only talk when breathing out and you breathe during the commas and the periods, you're less likely to use these words because you'll be breathing instead. And if you use these words too much, people will start counting them, and then they're tuning out. It's okay to leave spaces between your phrases because remember, it helps them process what you just said. A second key is volume. You want the sound to carry all the way to the other person so that the vibrations from your voice go all the way to the body of the other person, not fall on the floor before it gets to them. You can increase your volume without shouting by breathing through your nose so you have enough energy. Don't run out of air. Putting some edge in your voice so it cuts through. Not holding your breath so you're choking off. And opening your mouth more than you do now. The third key is melody. This is one of the biggest offenders. You heard it at the beginning of the talk with my Cinderella Reads story. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Cinderella. Once upon a time, all on the same note, monotone. And then if I get really excited, I go, once upon a time, there was a girl named Cinderella. Two tones, duotone. Neither one of them are what you want. Now I know there are certain highly technical fields where monotone is very common. But you want to stand out in a good way by using all the notes in the scale. Just moderate it a little more than you might if you were in some other kind of field where they don't do that. The best way to add melody to what you're saying is to remember these three things. Walk up the stairs, walk down the stairs, stay on the landing. When you walk up the stairs with your voice, you sound happy, energetic, excited. When you walk down the stairs, you could sound sad or tired or serious. When you stay on the landing, it's kind of safe and boring unless you use it occasionally for effect, because now you can really make a point if you've been all over the place and suddenly you stay there. So what you want to do is alternate for contrast. Sometimes walk up the stairs, sometimes walk down the stairs, sometimes stay on the landing. But don't jump all over the place because that's hard to follow. You want to save that for dramatic effect. A couple things you want to watch out for. Ending every sentence going down. Happens when you run out of air or because someone told you not to go up. Swooping up instead of walking up the stairs. Everything sounds like a question. Monotone or duotone. We talked about that earlier. So how do you stop? How do you stop going down at the end of every sentence? How do you stop swooping? Decide where you want to walk up the stairs, where you want to walk down the stairs, and when you want to stay on the landing. Practice it. See how it sounds. And breathe at the commas to give yourself enough air to get to the end of the sentence. And I got some homework exercises for this too. If you think it sounds weird at first, it's okay. You'll get used to it. So now we're going to practice. We're going to put all that stuff together, and I'm going to demonstrate this with my original story. There was my daughter, Mariah.
Standing on the steps of the school bus, grinning from ear to ear, while I took her picture to celebrate the first day of first grade.
She couldn't wait to go to big girl school like her sister, Olivia. All right, so clearly that was weird and you wouldn't want to listen. And so now I'm going to start again, changing it up, mixing my voice around, and I even tweaked the story a little bit if you remember how it went, and you'll see why in a minute. There was my daughter Mariah, standing on the steps of the school bus, grinning from ear to ear while I took her picture to celebrate her first day of first grade. I'm off to big girl school like Olivia. 4 months later, we had to fight with her to get her on that bus. We knew something was wrong. Our bright-eyed child had become sullen and withdrawn. We talked to her and the teacher. Oh, she's just a little delayed in reading. It's nothing to worry about. But it is. Mariah acts out at home. She rarely wants to even listen to a bedtime story, and the teacher can't seem to help her. One day, Mariah flat out refuses to get on the bus. We're at our wits' end. We know that when children don't learn to read well in their early years, it affects their entire school career. Imagine what Mariah and the world will miss if we don't get this right now. All right. Now that you are pros at your voice, I've got 2 pro voice tips. The first is body language and hand gestures. Don't move your feet unless there's a good reason. Shifting them, shuffling, and pacing can be distracting. So here's a simple tip. Start in the beginning. Plant your feet. When you get to a natural breaking point, walk or turn to the left, depending on whether it's a camera or a stage you're dealing with. When you get to another natural breaking point, walk or turn in the other direction. And you can repeat this if the talk is longer. Go back to the middle, go to one side, go to the other side. Make eye contact through an entire thought. It doesn't have to be at the same time as you're walking, because that could get a little weird. You probably want to shift your eyes faster than you shift your movements. Try not to use parallel gestures very often. Use one hand, parallel gestures. It's weird. It's like you're a referee in a football game or something. Use one hand or do different things with your hands like this, like you would in real life if you're really talking to somebody. You want it to be as normal looking as possible. If you're on the stage, it has to be bigger, but it still has to look halfway normal, just bigger normal. Make your gestures direct and clear. Halfway, halfway, I'm not sure what you mean. Make it clear. I'm counting, I'm pointing, I'm directing, I'm doing something that's very precise. The second pro tip, anxiety. If you breathe through your nose and more deeply, you should experience less anxiety anyway, because it gives you more oxygen to your lungs. And a quick way to dispel anxiety if you're about to record a video or about to give a talk or whatever you're going to do is to take 2 sharp breaths in through your nose and then quickly and forcefully exhale through your mouth and repeat 3 to 5 times. You also can make a fist, press it against your diaphragm and cover it with your other hand and press in while doing this. This lowers the carbon dioxide level and concentrates the energy at the center of your body, and I'll demonstrate. A lot of singers do this right before they go on stage. So, you've heard me explain how to use your voice, and the only way you're going to get better at using your voice is to practice, which is why I gave you practice exercises. Write stories, record your voice, analyze it based on what I taught you, practice and repeat. And if you want professional help, I do voice and story coaching as part of my business. So thank you so much for coming today. We're going to have a couple minutes for Q&A. If you already put stuff in the Q&A or the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can, or if Steve might have to unmute you, I'm not sure how that works. And after we have a couple minutes for Q&A, I'll do a brief summary. We'll end the recording, and then I will stay after for about 10 minutes or so if anybody has any more detailed questions.
All right, thanks, Kathleen. That was fantastic. If you have any questions, we were having a little issue with the chat box earlier in the webinar, but I think I fixed that. If you have any questions or thoughts, please, you can put it in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and we can respond to that. And while folks are thinking of those, we can take a few minutes to do that. Kathleen, I've been given presentations and teaching classes for a long time, and I learned a lot of new things today. One of the things I was wondering while we wait for any questions from the audience is, one of the things I've struggled with is times is if you think you're going to have a certain amount of time for a presentation, let's say, and it turns out you've got less time for that. Do you have any tips for kind of what to do in the moment?
I do, and I've run into this before. It's tricky if you've constructed a talk in a specific way for a specific reason, and that's when you really have to keep going back to the principle of what is the most important thing for my audience to hear, and pare it way down to focus on that. If you have a story that's in the middle of your talk, it's kind of hard to make that story shorter on the fly, but you can cut other stuff out and just say, if I only have this many minutes, like say you have to go from 25 minutes to 15, that's a lot to cut out. You've got to really say to yourself, what's the one thing they can't live without, and cut around it. It's hard.
Yeah,
hopefully you have at least 15 or 20 minutes to think about it, and not while you get up to start to talk.
Yeah, I used to deal with this in my corporate career, where you'd be meeting with somebody and you'd say like, well, I've got 30 minutes on the agenda, but I need the 10-minute version in case people before me go long and I've only got 10 minutes. I need the 10-minute version of how to get across those key points. It's a good point.
And that is an excellent idea, actually, is to always have in the back of your mind, if I were going to cut this, what's the short version?
Mm-hmm. No, that is really helpful.
One of the training I took required me to give a speech in 5 minutes. And I'm like, you can't possibly do anything in 5 minutes. And he said, yes, you can. And if you can learn how to do it shorter, it's easy to make it longer. It's harder to make it shorter. So practicing making things short, I had a 2-minute requirement in another thing I took. And oh my gosh, 2 minutes is nothing. So it's a good idea to practice short and say, here's my bullet point, or here's my down and dirty version. Critical, here's my next tier up, and then here's the one that I thought I was going to give.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. It can be challenging. Again, if anybody has, I'm not seeing any questions or comments right now, but if anybody has anything, feel free to put it in the chat. We can stand for a couple minutes here. One other thought I had around this content, or this concept, was you hear the advice of like reading the room, right? Which can be hard to do if you're online. Do you have any tips for that, about whether you're going into a situation where you think it might go one direction, but it might go in a different direction, how to pick up cues from the audience to read the room?
Well, in this situation, it's impossible because I can't see anybody except myself. If you're in a Zoom, it's a little hard to read the room because you have to look one at a time, and you don't get the same sense of energy. But reading the room, part of it is making eye contact with people who seem interested. If someone's crossing their arms entirely, they probably don't want to be there anyway. So it's almost like don't try to win them over. But if somebody seems half interested in the beginning and you make eye contact with them and then you see them shifting away, you know you've got to do something. Sometimes you might be talking too slowly, or you might not be pausing enough, so they can't take it in and they're just overwhelmed. Get a sense of the energy. Is there a lot of noise? If there's a lot of noise, it's because they've got pent up energy. Turn something into an exercise where they get to participate. Don't ask questions right away because that puts people on the spot, but maybe get them to do something. Stand up, do something, act something out. My voice teacher is really good at this. When he reads a room and he sees there's that, he immediately has them do something to participate in the talk. Mm-hmm. So, and then also it might behoove you to make it shorter.
Yeah. No, it's
if
a good
it's
point.
after lunch and they're tired.
Yeah. And those are great tips too about even like if you're at a networking event, right? If you're going to meet with somebody, trying to read their reaction and you want to go and talk to them about your business, and you might get the sense that they're not really interested. Maybe you walk away and maybe you circle back with them later at the same networking event. When the mood might be a little bit different.
Yes. And as you heard me talk about with the Pat Flynn example, the best way to prevent that from occurring is to say something that leaves an air of mystery, that hints of the arc to the story, but doesn't say it, that you don't blah, 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 blah about what you do, that it invites them into a process of exploration where they are participating in the story. And if they don't care, they're not going to ask you any questions. But if they do care, they'll certainly ask you questions.
Yeah.
And then you get a chance to say a little more. But you want it to be give and take all the time, not monopolizing the conversation either, just because somebody gave you a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. I'm not seeing any questions coming in from the audience, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up. Did you have some closing comments you wanted to make before I wrap it up?
I do. I want to remind everyone that the handouts were already emailed to you, along with resources that you can use if you want to learn more and practice exercises so that you can get better and better at this. That you'll get a link to the recording via email as soon as it's available, and usually that's within one day. And if you can't find the handouts, you can always respond to the email and request a resend. And before we close, just think about this. What would it mean for you and your business to be a standout communicator? To enchant your customer and have them hanging on every word? Because the heart of your business is communication, and the heart of communication is relationship, the relationship you want to build. And the one with the best message wins. That includes both telling a better story and telling that story better. And when you get better at telling your story so your customer can see themselves in it, you get them to start listening. And when you invite your customer to a bigger purpose and learn to use your voice and body to convey the emotion of your story, you get them to keep listening. All right. Thank you so much for coming. The recording will end now. And I am certainly, you're welcome to hang around if you want to for longer, if you have any detailed questions that you didn't want to ask while the session was being recorded.
All right, great. And before I stop recording, just to let everybody know, we will send a link to the recording. It will be available on our YouTube page. If you go to YouTube and search for SCORE Greater Hartford, you'll find a number of recorded webinars that we have done in the past on a variety of topics. And again, if you are interested in learning more about SCORE and signing up for mentoring services, you can do that at score.org. Also, if you did not receive the handout that I sent out yesterday, perhaps you signed up late, we'll send that around with a link to the recording as well, so you can have that. With that, I'm going to stop recording, but Kathleen and I will hang on for a little bit if anybody has any questions.